Hello and welcome to All 24 News World News Program. I'm your host Islam Said, and here are tonight's top stories. Zionist massacres continue in Gaza, displaced civilians targeted in so-called humanitarian zones, while over 50,000 remain trapped under siege in Rafah. Coming up next, Middle East situation escalates. A deadly Zionist raid hit southern Lebanon. 7 were killed in a Zionist strike on Syria. And U.S. airstrikes in Yemen claimed the lives of 8 children. Also in our news, the Makhzen regime doubles its borrowing to avoid bankruptcy, while health workers stage a nationwide strike and anti-normalization voices grow louder. And Moscow and Kiev agree to avoid force in the Black Sea. Washington begins easing agricultural sanctions, and Ukraine seeks further talks on the Riyadh agreement. Stay with us for more details. Welcome to the program. First off, in our news, Zionist airstrikes pounded multiple areas across the Strip, leaving dozens dead and many more wounded. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is deepening, with relentless airstrikes hitting displaced families, homes, and refugee camps. Overnight, at least 13 Palestinians, including children, were killed when occupation warplanes targeted makeshift tents in Khan Yunis. More casualties followed in Rafah, Gaza City, and Beit Lahia as air raids intensified across the Strip. The Palestinian Civil Defense says rescue teams are still pulling bodies from the rubble. In central Gaza, an airstrike on Al Burij refugee camp claimed 10 lives, including 8 members of the same family. Meanwhile, heavy shelling in Beit Lahia killed at least 7 people as residential buildings took direct hits. And in Rafah, a Zionist drone strike targeted a civilian car, killing 2 and wounding others.
Enough destruction, enough killing. We have horrific injuries in the hospital. Go and see. Enough. My message to the world is, look with mercy at Gaza. Gaza is not Hamas. Gaza is ordinary civilians like me and you and others.
The death toll in Gaza continues to climb. In just 24 hours, at least 62 more Palestinians were killed and nearly 300 others wounded as occupation airstrikes battered the Strip. The Palestinian Ministry of Health is sounding the alarm. Since March 18, nearly 800 people have been killed, bringing the overall death toll from the war to a staggering 50,144, with more than 113,000 wounded. Officials warn that the actual numbers could be even higher, as relentless strikes make it nearly impossible to recover bodies. For a third consecutive day, Zionist forces have kept more than 50,000 displaced Palestinians trapped under siege in Tel Sultan, west of Rafah. The Palestinian Red Crescent is reporting heavy gunfire and explosions in the besieged area. Adding to the crisis, the fate of 9 ambulance crew members remains unknown 3 days after their convoy was struck. At least 16 emergency responders are also caught in the blockade, while international efforts to lift the siege have been denied. Meanwhile, the UN says more than 124,000 people have been displaced again as Zionist attacks intensify. For thousands in the besieged Strip, every day brings new hardships. Medical care is scarce, and the wounds of war, both physical and emotional, are often irreversible. Among the most harrowing tragedies, thousands of children have lost limbs in violent airstrikes. Let's find out more about their story with Salman Sibna.
At first glance, it looks like a scene of normal childhood. A group of girls playing, laughing, and enjoying a moment of fresh air. A simple pleasure these Zionist occupiers failed to take from them. But a heartbreaking detail disrupts this picture. A walking frame standing next to them. It belongs to Sila, a young girl whose leg was amputated nearly 15 months ago after being severely burned by an airstrike.
This young girl's life has been destroyed. Girls her age run, climb stairs and go out. But little Sila sits in a wheelchair.
At first, Doctors tried to save her leg, but the burns were too deep. The bone was exposed. Orphaned by war, Sila is now learning to walk again, this time with a prosthetic leg. But the emotional scars remain.
I try so hard to make her happy, but it's no use. The pain, the amputation, it changes everything. She feels different. She takes a few steps, then falls on her back.
Thousands of children in Gaza share her fate, including Yemen, another young amputee.
I'm happy for him. He will finally walk again. He will move without help. He will return to life.
But for many others, that hope is still far away due to a lack of medications and medical devices. Doctors have described cases of limb amputations caused by infections that should have been easily treated. For many, rehabilitation involves prosthetics, wheelchairs, and physiotherapy services tailored to their specific needs. A wheelchair, a walker, a prosthetic limb. For these children, these aren't just medical tools, they're the only path forward. Even with prosthetics, the wounds of war run deep. But despite everything, these children keep moving forward toward a future they never imagined, but one they are determined to embrace.
Moving on to Lebanon, an occupation drone strike hit southern country overnight, leaving one dead and several injured. A Lebanese man was killed when a Zionist airstrike targeted a car in the town of Qaqai al-Jisr, deep in the Nabatiya district. The Lebanese National News Agency reports that the attack, one of several in recent weeks, adds to growing fears of a wider regional conflict. As for the escalating tensions in the Middle East, Yemen's Houthi group claims they've struck deep inside the Zionist entity and engaged a U.S. aircraft carrier in a fresh round of attacks. The Houthis say they fired 2 ballistic missiles at entity's Ben Gurion airport and targeted the USS Harry Truman for the second time in 24 hours. The group's military spokesman, Yahya Saree, released a video on Telegram vowing to keep up attacks until the occupation lifts its siege on Gaza. Meanwhile, U.S. forces responded overnight, launching multiple airstrikes on Houthi positions in Yemen.
The missile force targeted Ben Gurion Airport in Jaffa with 2 missiles, a Dul Faqar and a Palestine II hypersonic missile, successfully achieving its goal in retaliation for American aggression and civilian massacres in Sana'a and Sada. Naval missile and drone forces struck multiple hostile warships in the Red Sea, including the American aircraft carrier Truman, using the ballistic and cruise missiles and drones. This engagement, the second in 24 hours, highlights ongoing efforts to disrupt Israeli navigation and target the occupying entity until the aggression ends and the Gaza siege is lifted.
In a related matter, a dire warning comes this time from UNICEF as 8 children were killed in a heavy U.S. airstrikes on northern Yemen. The one body says the escalating conflict is taking a devastating toll on Yemen's youngest. UNICEF's representative in Yemen, Peter Hawkins, called this situation catastrophic as U.S. airstrikes ramp up across several governorates. In the latest wave of attacks, dozens of civilians, including women and children, were reported dead or wounded. Similarly, staggering 33% of children in Yemen's western regions are suffering from acute malnutrition. That's the latest grim assessment from UNICEF. The United Nations Children's Fund says the crisis is worsening with millions of children at risk. The agency urgently needs $157 million in aid to expand relief efforts, deploy mobile medical teams, and reach those in remote areas. Another development in the Middle East, Zionist forces launched a deadly incursion into Syria's Daraa province, killing 7 and injuring others in heavy artillery shelling. The attack targeted the town of Koya in the Yarmouk basin, forcing families to flee as Zionist occupation tanks pushed into the area. The Syrian Foreign Ministry swiftly condemned the strike, calling it a blatant violation of sovereignty and international law. Algeria, speaking on behalf of the A3+ group at the UN Security Council, has strongly condemned the Zionist entity's airstrikes on Syria, calling them a blatant violation of the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Addressing a Security Council briefing on Syria, Algeria's UN Ambassador Ammar Benjama reaffirmed that the Golan Heights remains occupied Syrian land under UN resolutions. He called on the Zionist entity to respect the disengagement agreement and halt its aggression.
Further compounding the security challenges are the ongoing IDF airstrikes against military sites in Syria's territory. Also are the alarming statements by Israeli officials about, I quote, the indefinite presence of their forces in Syrian territory and their intention to establish a demilitarized area in southern Syria, all of which violate Syria's territorial integrity and sovereignty. The A3+ condemns such irresponsible statements and actions which will only exacerbate regional instability. We stress that the Golan Heights is an occupied Syrian territory and reaffirmed by the Security Council Resolution 497. And we call for full respect for the 1974 disengagement agreement.
UN Ambassador Benjama also called on the international community to back a unified Syrian state, one that upholds the rights of all its citizens free from discrimination.
The challenges confronting Syria requires the full support and solidarity of the international community. The A3+ stresses the importance of building a Syria that is inclusive of all its citizens, free from any form of discrimination, and that embraces the aspirations of all Syrians. We believe that the establishment of a committee to promote civil peace and reconciliation, to promote and facilitate communication between communities is essential to achieving lasting peace in Syria.
Morocco is ramping up its external borrowing, framing it as a push for a greener future and a response to Al Hawz earthquake. But critics aren't buying it. Human rights groups and civil society organizations accuse the Makhzen of siphoning off international funds disguised as foreign currency bonds while the country's economic struggles deepen. Anti-normalization activists in Morocco are sounding the alarm. They warn of a deliberate push to reshape Moroccan society under Zionist influence, an effort, they say, to erode national identity and tighten control over state institutions. Ahmed Wahman, head of the Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization, isn't mincing words. In a Facebook post, he claimed this isn't just about territorial influence, it's a deep infiltration into Morocco's most sensitive institutions.
The more dangerous aspect is that the Zionist attack is not limited to the land alone, but extends to the social and cultural structure, and even to the state institutions in a sensitive manner, where the system and its apparatuses work to re-infiltrate Zionist society into the region.
Morocco's health sector is bracing for a major showdown. Unions have announced a nationwide strike set for Wednesday, affecting hospitals and medical facilities across the country. The Moroccan National Health Union is calling for mass participation, urging healthcare professionals from hospitals, preventive health centers, and administrative offices to join the walkout. At the heart of their protest, demanding better working conditions and safeguarding their hard-earned rights, in Rabat, a protest is planned outside the Ministry of Health headquarters. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune met with former Tanzanian President Jakaya Kikwete on Tuesday, receiving a message from President Samia Suluhu. Talks centered on reinforcing bilateral cooperation and deepening long-standing ties. Kikwete hailed relations as excellent, emphasizing shared perspectives on key international and African issues. The meeting was attended by top Algerian officials, including Ministers of State, Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf and Health Minister Abdelhak Saihi. French prosecutors kicked off their case Tuesday against former President Nicolas Sarkozy, accusing him of receiving illegal Libyan funding for his 2007 campaign. The high-stakes trial, set to unfold over 2.5 days, also implicates 3 former ministers. If convicted, Sarkozy faces up to 10 years behind bars, a €400,000 fine, and a 5-year ban from public office. His defense will present its case starting Monday. Tensions in the Russia-Ukraine war may be shifting as a new ceasefire agreement aims to reduce attacks in the Black Sea and on key energy infrastructure. Brokered by Washington, the deal includes a 30-day pause on strikes, but disagreements over sanctions and exports are already causing friction. The details with Sofian Kanturi.
After separate talks in Riyadh, Moscow and Kiev agreed to avoid military strikes on ships in the Black Sea, a deal brokered by Washington. The US also announced a 30-day truce on attacks against energy facilities in both countries, starting from March 18th. But there is a catch. Russia wants restrictions lifted on its agricultural exports, while Ukraine isn't happy about the US easing sanctions on Russian fertilizers.
It's important to conduct additional technical consultations as soon as possible to agree on all the details and technical aspects of implementing, monitoring and regulating the arrangements. If Russian warships move from the eastern part of the Black Sea, Ukraine will have the full right to exercise its right to self-defense.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's committed to the ceasefire but opposes Washington's move to help Russia return to the global market. Meanwhile, Kiev is calling for more consultations to iron out the details of the agreement.
We believe this weakens our position and undermines the sanctions. In our opinion, we do not yet know the details of this matter. Despite our lack of trust in Russia, we will do our duty to implement the agreements from the Ukrainian-American meeting. We hope that the maritime ceasefire will begin immediately. Ukrainian and American officials have agreed on the possibility of third-party supervision over aspects of a future ceasefire. This is not a bad thing. For example, a party from Europe or Turkey could be involved in the maritime situation, and perhaps a party from the Middle East in the energy sector.
Despite the diplomatic progress, tensions remain high. Ukraine launched drone attacks on Russian energy facilities, hitting a gas distribution station in Luhansk and causing a power outage at a nuclear plant in Rostov-on-Don. With Washington actively mediating, this fragile agreement could be the first step toward broader de-escalation, or just another temporary pause in a war with no clear end in sight.
The Sudanese army says it's making fresh battlefield advances in Khartoum, launching drone strikes on the Rapid Support Forces positions in key southern neighborhoods. After retaking the General Intelligence Service headquarters, the army seized combat vehicles, weapons and ammunition. Meanwhile, heavy artillery barrages have pounded RSF strongholds in Al-Fashir, North Darfur, with the military claiming to have destroyed over 20 RSF vehicles, with Khartoum now reportedly under full army control. Al-Fashir remains the next major battleground. The Sudanese army has tightened its grip around the Republican Palace, a key stronghold it recently recaptured from the Rapid Support Forces. Soldiers celebrated the victory, marking a symbolic win in the 2-year conflict. However, reports suggest that nearly 95% of the historic site has been severely damaged. With the palace back under military control, the army is focused on securing its gains in the ongoing battle for dominance.
We keep our word. As you can see, we're currently at the presidential palace. The media claim that the RSF is still there. This is not true. We're at the presidential palace. If you wish to meet us, come to the presidential palace, and you will find us. You will find us up to the border with Chad, if God wills. You said you wanted to establish democracy? A democracy accompanied by vandalism, looting, and theft?
الحسرة أصابتنا شديد جدا بعد المناظر اللي شفنا عليها.
The sorrow and distress are very intense after seeing the state of the new palace. I mean, at the very least, it is a heritage building, a historical building. It is a structure with great symbolic significance. There are things that money cannot buy at all. If something can be replaced with money, that's one thing. But a historical monument, it's extremely difficult to restore it to its original state. I hope we can restore it yet, but it's like 95% destroyed.
South Sudan is on the brink of another civil war, warns UN envoy Nicholas Haysom, as peace efforts hit a dead end. Speaking on Monday, he expressed deep concern over the government's abrupt postponement of negotiations, stressing that over 60,000 civilians have already been displaced by escalating violence. Haysom made it clear, without genuine commitment from President Salva Kiir and his rival, Riek Machar, diplomatic efforts are doomed to fail.
These indiscriminate attacks on civilians are causing significant human losses and horrific injuries, particularly burns, including among women and children. Our humanitarian partners estimate that at least 63,000 people have fled the area. The collective message for the region and the international community is clear. We're still convinced that there is only one way out of the spiral of conflict, which is to return to the peace agreement. Slipping into conflict would erase all the hard-earned gains made since the signing of the peace agreement in 2018, and it would destroy not only South Sudan, but the entire region, which simply cannot bear another war.
With tensions boiling over the eastern DRC, African leaders are stepping in to revive stalled peace talks. In a high-stakes virtual summit, heads of state from the East African Community and the Southern African Development Community agreed to shake up mediation efforts, bringing in heavyweight diplomats to break the deadlock. The move follows Angola's failed attempt to broker peace. Rwanda called the meeting a crucial step forward as fighting with the M23 movement rages on.
The situation in Eastern DRC is not getting better, it is getting worse. And therefore, it is a source of concern, not just for DRC as a country, but all of us in the East African community and SADC, because it has the potential to spill over into our countries with the attendant serious consequences of displacement of people, loss of life, and the challenges of instability that it will come with it.
And now it's time to catch up on more news stories making headlines around the world in the News in Brief with Zahra Farjani.
Alexander Lukashenko was sworn in as Belarusian president for the 7th time on Tuesday after winning January's election. He took the oath on a special copy of the constitution and received his presidential certificate from the Central Election Commission. North Korea condemned recent joint naval drills by South Korea, the US and Japan on Tuesday, warning of a decisive response. It accused them of escalating tensions by conducting the exercises near Jeju Island last week. Zionist forces arrested Palestinian director Hamdan Bilal on Tuesday. Bilal, who worked on the Oscar-winning No Other Land, was violently assaulted by settlers in Susia, southern West Bank, before being blindfolded and taken to an unknown location. Over 10,000 Finns urged the national broadcaster to push for Israel's exclusion from Eurovision over the Gaza war. Two petitions, one signed by 500 cultural professionals, called for Finland to withdraw if the entity participates, citing concerns over whitewashing its image.
That's the end of our news program for tonight. Thank you for watching. Good night.